whatever that small pedal is. Okay, backing up. Hey everybody, welcome back to the lab. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we are giving away a guitar and some guitar pedals. If you haven't already entered, you better do so now. We're getting really close to giving away the first pedal. The details are in the video description below. Just click on the link, like, and subscribe, and good luck to everybody. Now, today I wanted to talk just a little bit about amp cloning and the differences between the available options out there. Specifically, we're going to look at the options that let you clone in just software land. So, for example, with a Kemper, you need a Kemper stage or a Kemper head, or the new Kemper, whatever that small pedal is. Okay, backing up. The hardware unit itself is what does the cloning or profiling of your amplifiers. Same thing with Quad Cortex. However, with Headrush and with Tonex, the cloning can happen in the software world. With Headrush, you can do it with the hardware unit, so you don't need a computer to do amp clones with Headrush. But with Tonex, you have to use the Tonex software to make your amplifier clones. A friend called and he said, "Hey, I saw your video. I'm really thinking about purchasing one of these units, but tell me, which one do I want? What are the differences and features specifically around the amp cloning?" Definitely want to do cloning on my computer. That just feels better to me rather than having to learn a hardware system. So what are my options? What are the differences? And how do they compare to one another? Which one am I going to like more? So today we're going to compare. We're going to compare Headrush making clones with their amp cloner software that is available. We're going to make the same clone using Tonex, using the Tonex software. And then for good measure, we're going to throw in a third option and use Neural Amp Modeler. And we're going to compare these three software options. It's probably important to note that with Neural Amp Modeler, there's not an associated hardware box. We're just throwing it in there for comparison. My friend who I was talking to is really only considering the options that have the hardware model that he can use live and in the studio and make clones using the software on his computer. He's also very interested in using just the plugins when he's recording rather than having to wire up any hardware units. So, Adam, this video is for you, and let's get started. Okay, so what we've got now is we've got the amp cloner software from Headrush open. And we're going to go ahead and make a clone of this high gain Bad Cat amplifier because that's what sounds fun to me right now. So you just click Let's Get Started. You tell it what you're doing. So if you're doing just the amp with no speaker, you'd click here. If you're doing a pedal, click here. It just gives it some hints on what it's working with. But we are doing a full stack and combo, and we're using guitar. So we're using a Bad Cat amplifier, just dimed on the gain, into a Mesa Boogie Road King 4x12 cabinet. You click Next, choose your routing setup. It remembers mine. Often when I'm making these videos, I have to do some crazy routing stuff to record the audio for the video at the same time I'm doing the video. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to plug your guitar into your recording interface and you're going to tell it the input. Then you're going to choose where you're going to hear the sound from, so the main outs in my case. From there, you need to send your guitar out of your audio interface into a reamp box. In my case, we're going line out 5, and I am using a UST reamp box in this case, and then from your reamp box to your amp. And then you just choose where your microphone is plugged in to your interface. Simple as that. So you select those, and it lets you test it out. So, okay, so that's looking good. Okay, so Headrush usually recommends input of -6, so that's exactly what we're hitting in both of these spaces, and it sounds like the amp, which is back behind us in that amplifier booth. And then you just hit Next. And you can try to match these to what your settings on your amplifier actually are. I always just leave them right in the middle. It just gives you more, in my opinion, gives you more flexibility in either direction to change the final sound of the amp that you've cloned when you're using it. So, but if you want to match them up, great, go ahead and match them up. Now we're going to say start clone. And it's going to make some beeps and boops. Okay, we got ourselves a successful clone. Now you can see what it sounds like and adjust it to your taste. Okay, so you can refine it from there. That is pretty dang close, and we're just doing this for demonstration purposes, so I'm just going to move along and not try to refine it too much. But once you're satisfied with your clone sound compared to your target amplifier, that is really cool being able to switch back and forth between the real amp and the clone. It really lets you dial in a very exact match. So we just click next. It's going to let us choose a skin, and I'm going to choose this one just because. Then you got to name it, and we're going to do it, let's call it Bad Cat so I don't forget what it is. Bad Cat Clone Demo, and I'm going to spell that correctly. Captured amp is Bad Cat. Captured cabinet is Mesa Road King. No pedal. We're going to call this high gain, and then you just save it. Now moving on to Tonex, what you do is you just open up your Tonex software. Usually looks like this. You click on it through a very, very similar just setup process that Amp Cloner from Headrush has. They're very similar in the way the software works. We're going to choose Amp and Cab again. So this is very similar to Amp Cloner. You're going to tell it where your guitar is plugged in. You're going to tell it how to send the signal out to your reamp box, in our case the UST, and then you're going to tell it where your microphones are plugged in. Once you've got the routing all set up, it's going to let you set up your DI level for your guitar, just for testing, and that's fine. Then from there, okay, so we're a little hot. I'm only using one mic, so that's why we're only seeing one mic input level, but so I needed to turn down the output level on my preamp for Tonex as compared to Headrush, but okay, so that sounds pretty good. Now, another cool thing about Tonex is you can switch over to their pre-recorded stuff. And I gotta be honest with you, this is actually pretty handy when you're trying to mess with settings and dial in your amp. Maybe you're working with microphone placement, just trying to get things right. It's really handy if you're working on it by yourself, just being able to use these pre-recorded guitar DIs. So from there, you just click next when you're happy with that. And first, you're gonna capture. It's gonna play a bunch of beeps and boops, and then play some guitar parts, and then you'll move on to the the AI portion of it. But let's get it going. Okay, so as you can see, Tonex has spent more time just playing sounds and listening to the amplifier than Headrush did, and we're not done yet. Now you get to use an AI model to train the data it just captured. You've got fast, default, and advanced. They say you want to use advanced for high gain and fuzz style sounds. In my experience, that is usually it's usually worth it. Like if you're doing high gain stuff, the advanced is usually worth it. The downside is, depending on what computer you have, what setup you've got, the advanced training can take an incredibly long time, you know, maybe a couple hours. So default for most things is going to work out fine. And for the purposes of this video, we're going to go, actually, you know what, we're going to do advanced because we're going to compare these models later. So we want Tonex to be able to do as good as it thinks it can do. So, you know, we're just going to fast forward through this advanced model training and we'll compare them, and we'll compare, of course, with Neural Amp Modeler as well. So click through to there. After you've chosen fast, normal, or advanced, we're going to start our advanced training. Make sure you click the button. I can't tell you how many times I forgot to click this square, making profiles, walked off to go have dinner or something, and then came back to realize I didn't even start the training. So make sure you click the button. But once you've done that, it's just a waiting game. Okay, now that our model is finally ready, you'll be presented with this screen with the nice green check mark. You want to hit next. You just review your connections and stuff if you need to. But now we get to the fun part, which is where we can compare our new tone model to the real rig, just like we were able to do with Headrush. So. So it's sounding pretty good. Compared to the real rig, it's not bad at all. Now, you'll notice Headrush, using the amp cloner, had you know, a pretty wide array of adjustments you could make to match your tone more closely with the original amplifier. But with the Tonex, you have one option. You can increase or decrease the gain. So you have to clone and then wait for that model. It takes a substantial amount of time. And when you come out the other end, you know, it works out pretty good most of the time, but on occasion there's problems and it just is not sounding the way it should, and you have no choice but to just start over again. But this time worked out great. Did a great job. So let's choose that. Let's name this. This is just where you save it into your Tonex. And this was our Bad Cat Clone demo. And we don't need keywords, optional. Bad Cat character is high gain. Amp channel was the lead channel. This was a Mesa Road King. It was a 4x12. We were using an SM57 and an MD421, and we were using a Neve 1073. So then you save and go to your player, and it's on the player, and you can play around with it all you want. And that is the Tonex. Okay, so now we've seen both the Headrush amp cloner, and we've cloned this amp with the Tonex. Now I just want to take a look at a third option here, which is Neural Amp Modeler. Now, Neural Amp Modeler is free and open source, so you can download and use this without having to pay any money. Tone Hunt has lots of Neural Amp Modeler models on there. You can sift through if that's your thing. I normally tend to purchase any models I need, or I create them myself. So this is going to be a little bit different than Headrush and Tonex. You know, Headrush and Tonex both cost some money. So they've got, you know, maybe a little bit more refined user interfaces. They're a little bit simpler to work with. Neural Amp Modeler being free and open source, it's a little bit different of a process. So what we have to do for Neural Amp Modeler is we need to download. They provide you with a WAV file, and we've got that represented right here as the Neural Amp Modeler clip. And what we need to do is we need to reamp this clip through our amplifier and then export that file. And then we will give Neural Amp Modeler both the input clip and the output clip, and it will do its magic. So I've got this clip playing out through my reamp box, the UST reamp box, into the Bad Cat amp. It is mic'd up. The Mesa Road King cab is mic'd up, and we're recording it into from amp right here. So what we need to do is just record this clip real quick. That's a fun one, huh? Interesting to listen to. So, a couple things to keep in mind about Neural Amp Modeler. Again, it's got to be 24-bit, 48 kilohertz. It needs to be in mono. And then I always normalize mine usually to about -6 dB. You don't want to clip it. You'll get an error if you clip it. But then you just hit play, and then after about 15 minutes, with these settings, 100 bucks, just after you hit play, about 15 minutes later, you'll see in your exported models, you should have downloadable files to be played in the Neural Amp Modeler, and you just want to download those. And you just select the model, and if you're using IRs, so I went ahead and loaded up, I wanted to give an example real quick. I went ahead and loaded up a direct model of the same amp on the same settings, and then I've just loaded up an Eminence IR. So With NAM and like ADA DSP, I think it's more common to do a direct model of the amplifier and then load an IR of the CAD. So there you go. There is NAM. Okay, now let's move on to comparing how these different clones sound to one another and to the real amp and how they perform in a mix. This is really my favorite part of doing these videos, is the part where we get to, write a little song and play some music. But yeah, but with that said, I only had about an hour to write and record all of these parts, so you're going to have to excuse the sloppiness. Or you can, tear me apart in the comments, whatever makes you happy. But, so I've just made a little song here, and I want to go and compare these. First, I recorded a little DI part of guitar, right? And then we've copied and pasted that DI track to each of these tracks. This one right here, for the Headrush, which actually we're using Revalver. And you can see we've got the Bad Cat clone demo loaded up in Revalver. And then for NAM, same thing. We have the NAM plugin, and we've got the Bad Cat clone demo loaded up in NAM. Same thing for Tonex. We have the Bad Cat clone demo loaded up in Amplitude as one of the Tonex options. Then for the real amp, what I did is I took this DI track and then I reamped it to this real amp track through the exact same setup we made the clones with. So we'll be able to, and then I played, if you're going to do something, you got to double up the heavy guitars. So I've also played just a doubling track right here on track 5, and I'm using a EVH, a 5150 amp model that I created just to create some space, make it sound big. I'm going to give away all of these clones that we made. So you can get this Bad Cat clone profile for the Headrush, for Neural Amp Modeler, and for Tonex. And I'm going to go ahead and give away this 5150 model that I made. This is available on Kemper and Tonex. So if you visit our website, sixstringlab.com, in the store, you'll be able to find these models for free. So free downloads for all these models. Please play with them and have fun. Also, I'll post a link to all those models in the description below as well. So all of these tracks, the Headrush, the Neural Amp Modeler, and Tonex, the only plugin we're using is, we're using Revalver for Headrush to load the clone. We're using Neural Amp Modeler for the NAM track to load the clone. And we're using Amplitude to load the Tonex clone. There are 0 effects on the real amp. And then on the 5150, we are loading up Amplitude to use the 5150 clone. The bass has got compression and reverb. It's just a DI track, but it's got some compression and EQ on it. And then the drums, of course, have some compression and EQ. So, but the guitar tracks themselves, these are the raw profiles and the raw amp. And that's another thing to know. 90% of the time when I'm making profiles or I'm recording an amplifier, I'm going to use a high-pass filter. I think on these profiles and with this recording, I actually went up to 150, so we're rolled off from 150 and below. And I do that even on my profiles because I want them to be ready to use. I want them to be able to sit in a mix if I'm recording, and I want them to be able to sit in a mix if I'm performing with them live. It's just less hassle after the fact. Now, some of the profiles I create, I won't do that high-pass filter. I'll leave, the full range. But for specific use cases, right, just for certain sounds and textures and certain amps where you want that lower end information, certain styles of music. But most of the time, You don't want too much low end in those guitars. It does not make them sound bigger. It makes them sit weird in the mix. And so anyway, that's something to know about these profiles is they're already high pass. They're ready to go. And hopefully, as you'll hear in this demo here, there's not a lot that even needs to be done to them as far as EQ. Let's check this out. So I've got this DI track copied over here as well. And we'll just kind of cycle through these parts first. And we'll listen to just the profiles versus the real amp. So I think what we can quickly determine from that is that the neural amp modeler and Tonex sound incredibly similar to one another. Similar enough, it might be fun to do a null test on them and see what the differences actually end up being. And the neural amp modeler and the Tonex are definitely closest to the real amp. The Headrush actually is missing a little bit of low-end information, and it's got a little mid-range in there that isn't present in any of the other, the real amp or either of the other profiles. So if you remember when we were creating these profiles with the amp cloner from Headrush, at the very end, we had an opportunity to refine that profile. We had a full range of EQ and a few other options that we could sit and play with and use those options to get the clone to sound as close to the original amp as possible. We didn't touch any of that. We went with the straight clone, and that's what we're hearing here. I did the same thing with the Tonex, although the only option they give you to refine is a little gain knob that can increase or decrease the gain a little bit. Neural Amp Modeler has no refinement options. You need to do all of your work up front and play with the settings, and you can get very sophisticated making those models if you want to. But, so straight out of the box, no refinement. The Headrush is furthest away from the original amplifier. So it's really worth noting, like if you're working with Amp Cloner and Headrush, take that opportunity to really refine the clone and get it matching the amp as closely as possible. It's actually of the better refinement options from all these different cloning platforms. Kemper has some good refinement in it, but still I think the Headrush refinement is even better than what Kemper offers. So let's go ahead and see how these clones and the real amp stack up in a mix. And you can see here what we're doing is the song will start using the Headrush, and the clones and the real amp will be slightly panned about 70% left. So in your left ear, you're hearing these. It will start with Headrush, move on to the neural amp model, then moving on to Tonex, and then lastly, we'll hear the real amp. And then about 75% panned to the right, we'll have the 5150 clone just providing a doubling track. So let's go ahead, and I think we should take a minute and listen through this and see what we think. And there we have it. What did you guys think? So, like we already talked about, I think the Headrush, that straight clone with no refinement, is furthest away from the original amp. But in the context of this mix, I like it the best. But again, like you can use the refinements to really dial in the clones on Headrush. All the clones sounded great. So yeah, go download these free clones we've got. And we named that particular song that we wrote for this episode Silent War. I was making fun of my sloppy playing, and my wife came in the studio and she's like, no, I really like that song. It's great. What's it called? And I was like, oh, it doesn't have a name. I'm just working on it for the video. And she's like, oh, I love it. I was like, okay. Then we're going to name it Silent War. And I'm naming it Silent War because my wife just released a book. It is available now for Kindle and hardback and paperback. So I'll put the link in the video description below. If you like to read, which I know most guitarists can't read, but if you do and you like to read, please click the link below and buy her new book. She'll love it. So there you have it, the Tonex cloning software, the Headrush amp cloner software, and the free and open source neural amp modeler. Now, there was a fourth one I wanted to throw into the mix, and I decided against it, and that is Eta-X from Eta DSP, also free and open source. You can go get their cloning software, and you can use their free plugin, their free VST plugin, and it's very similar to what we just saw. Eta DSP is it's more common to use direct amp sims and IRs. In fact, they recommend that's how you do it, is separate the amp sim from the IR. So keep that in mind. But I wanted to do its own episode for Eta DSP, just so we could cover making your own IRs and loading IRs and the way those things work and what's cool about them. Also, Eta DSP has hardware counterparts that it can run on. So there's the Mod Dwarf, very cool open product project that can run Eta DSP. Stratus from Chaos Audio, which in the coming months will be able to run Eta-X amp profiles. So if you're not familiar with the Chaos Stratus, check it out and go check out the Mod Dwarf, and we'll do a whole episode on that. There we go. I hope we covered that. I hope you got a feel for how each of them work and you can figure out which one works best for your needs. Don't forget, we're giving away some gear, so use the link in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon with some more cool gear.